The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
This is Ralph Tycho with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and I would just like to make note of the fact that the opinions expressed by Ian Kahanowitz regarding, quote, false allegations, unquote, against celebrities, newscasters, and the like, including Woody Allen, do not reflect the opinions, the beliefs, or anything to do with how Comfortably Zoned Radio Network feels. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
My baby dolls, we are back again, another episode of Genesis. Today we break from baseball and we are having a special guest on. We got Barry Williams, and many of you know Barry, being Gregg Brady back in the late 60s, early 70s. It's going to be an excellent show today, so stay tuned. As always, I am your host, Ian Kahanowitz, and you are listening to the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. Baseball season, well, it's, my Yankees are doing good. So, the Red Sox, where I live up here, they're doing great. And, the Yankees are doing great. So baseball's exciting, at least for me again. Poor Dodgers out in Los Angeles, they're having a tough time. And, of course, we'll speak with Barry about Don Drysdale and Joe Namath and all those guys that appeared on the Brady Bunch. But, it's an honor and pleasure to have Barry Williams. Of course, about 27 years ago, he published a book, Growing Up Brady, and I advise everyone to read it. It's very good reading. It's very insightful. And plus, Barry's doing a lot of stuff today. We'll talk about his band with his wife, Tina. And it's just one of those things you dream of, interviewing Barry Williams. So without any ado, welcome to the show, Barry.
Well, I appreciate that, Ian, and I appreciate that nice introduction.
Something. I got to watch your wife and you and the Travelers here. Let's talk about that. You got a traveling band over here.
Well, literally called the Travelers. Most bands, it's all about being on the road. And I created. You may not know this. I'm living now. I moved from Los Angeles, my home of the first 55 years. To the middle of the country in the Ozark Mountains, near Branson, Missouri.
Yep. You were on stage there for about 6 years. I think your show closed up in 2017, January 2017. You were doing that 70s show for
Music
about
Celebration, yeah. Living the Johnny Bravo dream. And beautiful area, Ozarks, lakes, trails, horses, hunting, hiking, fishing, you name it. It's really a beautiful, beautiful area, and we really enjoy being here. I'm sorry, we were talking about music. Oh, and the Travelers. So I did this musical variety show here for 6 years, and closed it, but wanted to continue living here, so I formed a trio with lead singer and a lead guitar player, electric, and I play acoustic, and we travel and do the most standards from all the way from the 50s, 60s to a lot of the 70s, pop music and some contemporary and country songs. So it's kind of a mixed bag of music, good music, but it's fun. We talk. It's multimedia. We get people out dancing. My singer Tina Mahina is a hula dancer, so we teach the hula and sing Don Ho. It's been a lot of fun and kind of relaxed and easy and comfortable, and people have a good time with us.
Yeah, and you got Mike Rostal on the guitars and vocals. Tina plays the drums, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, well, you are. She does the acoustic side. We don't, not drums, but more sticks and maracas and tambourine and ulis for the Hawaiian songs.
we need a bass player here. We need a drummer. This is a great thing. I saw a clip about it on your website. She sings great. You were singing. What were you singing? Oh, my love, oh, my kissing. You don't know what you've been missing. No, that wasn't what you were singing. You were singing something. But anyway, I like the way that sounded, and I like the way you had a guitar solo there. I saw on that little clip. Looks like a lot of fun. So where do you usually go? You usually go where Tina books you, or do you usually stay local in Branson, Missouri?
Not usually, not in Branson so much. That's hence the Travelers. But we do have occasional gigs in Missouri that we can drive to, and we have booking agents, so we can be anywhere in the country. We're out in Knoxville. We're going to be on a cruise ship. We're coming to Boxborough in July for Comic-Con, and so sometimes we'll tie up an appearance like that, like the Comic-Con that will be there in July, and then if they're having performing, we'll be one of the bands that will sing and that kind of thing. Now I'm not sure that's going to happen in Boxborough, but yeah, what ends up happening is we pack the suitcases and then pack the guitars and the cables and the equipment and go have a good time.
And it's good that you're working. You're going to be 64 this year, I think, in September 30th. I can't even believe you're 64. I can't even believe it's 50 years since the Brady Bunch is coming up on. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, it'll be next year, 2019, 50 years. Well, we're excited because we have things planned. We're looking at I might be going out to Kings Island in August this year, which would be kind of a precursor to the 50th anniversary. Kings Island, as you know, one of the episodes was featured when the Bradys traveled to Cincinnati. And so we've been back a couple of times to reminisce and, do questions and answers and perform a little bit and that kind of thing. And then we have things planned, a big cruise that will be coming up in November next year. And I may just have to give Hollywood a call and see about working up a little Brady Bunch star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Really? That's fantastic. But it's funny you mentioned, that you would give them a call, because weren't you the one, as I read in your book, that convinced NBC to take you guys out to Hawaii for the Hawaiian episodes?
Well, and that would be overstating it. What I did get to do was the producers and writers knew that I was a surfer. In fact, the only thing I have been longer than a Brady at this point in my life is a surfer, and I continue to surf in the islands when I go and can find some good waves. And sometimes right here in near Branson, because we live on a lake, a big lake called Table Rock Lake, and so I have my surfboard here and I surf behind the boat and surf the wake surf and that kind of stuff. But ABC, we were originally on ABC, and the writers wrote in this part of surfing in Hawaii. And when I got the script, they told me, well, we have this written, but we're going to use, a stunt person to actually do the surfing. And I was protesting, and as only teenagers can do. Gosh, no, I could do my own surfing. I've won contests from here to Arizona, I'm forgetting that Arizona didn't have any waves. And, they said, okay, we'll let you, cause there are insurance considerations, et cetera. So I finally convinced them. And once I had a yes on doing my own surfing, I went back to them and I said, oh, by the way, the waves in Hawaii are much, much different than the waves that I practice on here in California all the time. And so in order to save you money and save you time and for the efficiency of the production schedule, I think it would be a good idea to send me out to Hawaii a week early to practice on the Hawaiian waves so that we can, you could do your filming much more quickly. And they bought it, and so I worked out an extra week of surfing in Hawaii for the trip.
And you know something? It's funny because you were excited about that because you and every teenage boy in America had a crush on Maureen McCormick. But, you know, and this is, and, you know, you write this in your book, this is your chance, you know, this is going to be awesome. We're going to finally get together. But you also had Vincent Price on the show, which was, again, you got two different things going on here, comedy and horror. What's going on with that in Hawaii?
How cool. I mean, there are, oftentimes people think about the Brady Bunch. We don't think about how many guest stars and wonderful guest stars we had. A few that you mentioned earlier, sports people like Joe Namath and Don Drysdale and Wes Parker and Deacon Jones from the L.A. Rams. But Vincent Price, whom I had only known from his shocking and horror films and movies, was on board to be on our show, and turns out to be the nicest guy you can imagine. First on the set, last to leave, the ultimate professional, very, very charming, and a very commanding presence, I might add. So it was really a delight for all of us, especially my brothers, my Brady brothers, and I to work with him.
It was a fantastic episode. Let's talk about Don Drysdale, because you kid in the book, and I love this because I got to ask him this question. You know, Drysdale, you know, he's one of the most feared pitchers, for God's sakes, in the 1960s. You know, and he's on the episode, and you know, your character Gregg Brady has visions of becoming a pitcher, and he's joking the book, saying maybe I should have become a pitcher. You know, Roger Clemens, man, I should be making his kind of salary. Let's talk about that.
Sure. Well, Don was a hero to anybody that was really a baseball fan, and if you lived in Los Angeles, he was legendary for many reasons. Very tall man, almost 6'5", I think, but came on the set with no attitude. He literally did show me how he held the ball to throw a curve ball, as we joke about on the show. But instead of retiring to his dressing room in between takes and things like that, while they were setting up the cameras and moving the lights around and positioning for the next shot, Don would stay out there in that Brady Bunch backyard filled with AstroTurf, and Chris Knight and Michael Lookinland and I would stand out there and play catch with him. And that was, you know, kind of indicative of the kind of a guy he was.
And you know what's funny? Because back then, before 1976, and of course the Brady Bunch, I think, ended in 1974, if memory serves me correct, they had the reserve clause. And you would have just made, I think the biggest salary at the time was $100,000. A few years before the Brady Bunch went on air, Drysdale and Koufax went to O'Malley and the Dodgers and said, we're not going to play the 1966 season if you don't give us a salary raise. These guys are earning $75,000. Can you imagine that? Right. So they went in. And they demanded, together, they colluded together, and the Dodgers gave it. You only would be earning, if you were a ball player back then, until 76. In 76, you were around 21, 22. So then you'd start getting some real money. But back then, the ball players were not, what they are today, where they're getting an absorbent amount of money to do what they're doing. So it's like, poor thing, if, wrong era today, you would be making, forget it, just for sitting on the bench, you'd make $5 million. But you know what's interesting? You also went to the Grand Canyon, and that's another one of my favorite episodes. What was going on in the Grand Canyon?
Well, I think the networks wanted to get the Bradys out from the sound stage at some point, and our favorite episodes to film were always the ones that took us away, whether it was to Ohio or to the Grand Canyon or Hawaii. They built a really cute, I think, two-parter around that, and we got to experience the Grand Canyon from above it, below it, on it, riding the mules. I do remember one thing that was memorable for us. There's a big lodge that most everybody used, and it was we were staying there, and a grand room downstairs, a fireplace and kind of a thing. And so the cast was sitting around the fire watching TV or something, and guests were coming through. And I'd look over and you'd hear, oh, that's Carol Brady. That's Carol. Oh, look, Cindy Brady's there. And so is Jan and Gregg. And they all figured we were a real family.
That's fantastic. Now, I love Eve Plum. You know what? Everyone was in love with Marsha. And as a little kid, I loved Eve Plum as Jan. And you were writing the book. And, of course, her character, and it was, of course, parodied in the 1990s with, she's always having a breakdown or something. But she does artwork today, I believe, and she's very into the artwork, and she became very independent out from Maureen McCormick's shadow, I think. What do you think about that?
Well, I do, and she's a wonderful, wonderful artist. She had not yet begun that side of her career until after our show was over, but then I've since been able to see quite a bit of it. And I know that it's available to look at online as well. I don't know the URL, but she's quite accomplished and does art shows. And she's happier doing things that don't relate to back in her TV days.
And you know what's interesting? One of the things you spoke about in your book, and it's so true, because you've done so much more than just the Brady Bunch. You were on Broadway. You've had your own your own show on Sirius. Especially the live. We'll get to the live audience and stuff. But Eve Plum was very fortunate, and I was a little kid at the time. I mean, I was 6 years old, but I do remember the commercials. Dawn, Portrait of a Teenage Runaway. Totally different than a Jan Brady kind of stuff, and it really showed her acting ability. What did you think about it at the time?
I thought it was a great opportunity for her to get out from under the shadow of a sitcom and do a legitimate dramatic turn, and it was well received. She also was part of the television movies of the week, the Three Sisters, the classic, and so I know that she was very happy about doing that as well.
Yeah, I know. I mean, the time period was 1969 and 1974, and you had Vietnam going on, and you had corruption in the Nixon administration. Do you think the Brady Bunch, like many other sitcoms, were there to say, hey, we have a moral issue in every one of our programs, and whatever's happening, whatever terrible stuff's happening on the news, this is a place where you can feel at home like the rest of us here on set?
Well, some people would say that the very issues you described were moral issues as well. But I think one of the things that has led to the lasting power of and relevance of the Brady Bunch is that we weren't trying to tackle world news issues. Most of the things that we tackled were ongoing morality tales. How we all grew up, and people grow up today, and people grapple with those same episodes. Being insecure with their personality, or their head swelling because they did something nice, or they're feeling particularly cool about themselves, or blended families, and you're mixing in your stepbrother and sister animals into another household. Kids getting together and trying to raise money to buy presents for either their other siblings or their parents. The kinds of episodes that are timeless. Before the Bradys, during the Bradys, and ever since. So we managed to do that in a lighthearted way, but without tackling some of the global pressing issues of our time.
I'm sure with Schwartz, he had an ongoing feud with Robert Reed, and how did that affect the show?
Well, it affected Sherwood Schwartz and Robert Reed and the network the most greatly. They had a conflict of styles. It was, after all, Sherwood Schwartz's show, and Robert Reed signed on to it, Sherwood's sensibilities and sense of humor were dramatically different from Robert Reed's. Robert Reed was a perfectionist and also trained method actor, and classically trained in the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. And so some of the things that were convenient in terms of the script and cute and clever script-wise were not believable to him. So he fought very hard to bring some a greater sense of reality-based humor to the show. And I think, they both struggled with one another, but I think ultimately the show was the winner because I think there was a grounding that Robert Reed brought to the table that in the hands of another actor that was, let's say, just going for the jokes, might not have been able to give it. And I'm grateful for that.
And you know something? Florence Henderson would probably be the wild card here of keeping the peace and being instrumental in influencing not only you kids, but also Robert Reed and probably the staff that, things got to go on and everyone should just put their differences aside and let's get moving on the show.
Yeah, no doubt. In many ways, and part of it's because of the roles, but in many ways, our cast, functioned as a family. I mean, we all had our roles. Florence Henderson was an amazing woman, amazing talent, and a mother of four kids, all about and around our ages. So she was managing that home life as well as our brunch. And it was a pretty maternal role. Robert Reed we were the most consistent, and we were probably closer to him than any other aspect of his life, and he took on that role. Now, Alice would be the exception because Ann B. Davis, first of all, she didn't know how to cook, and I don't think you'd catch her cleaning the house either. So she had another role with us, and she was kind of the professional monitor. She didn't like it if we got out of hand or stopped, or we were goofing around too much, not paying attention or being professional. She'd kind of keep us in line there. But even as kids, I did function, and to some degree still do, as the reliable big brother, and so we had all those dynamics operating. And one of the things that Florence did was to keep us on track. And if Robert, she could always appeal to Robert Reed and say, look, I know it's this, that, the other, but let's just get this in and keep it going. And she was usually successful.
And you know what's ironic here? Because in 1991, when you published your book, Robert Reed did your forward at the time. And he said a lot of nice things. But he kept it, I believe, from everyone. And he had colon cancer. And he didn't tell anyone, really. And I think he told Florence Henderson, go tell the kids that, I'm in trouble.
Yeah, he called me directly as well.
Oh, he called you directly? Yeah.
But that was later in the game. He did do the forward. He did have a chance to read the book, which I was grateful for. He read it. He read what I said about him because I wasn't, pulling punches. I was trying to operate as a reporter, not to take a stand on it, but just this is what I saw happening. And he said to me, "Did I really act like that?" Yeah. But it wasn't long after that in '92, as a matter of fact, that he passed away.
Yeah, he was 59. I think he was young when he passed away.
As you mentioned earlier, I'm older than he was when he passed away, which is a great reminder to me of just how young he was.
And, you are the oldest, now of the bunch. Ann B. Davis died in, I think, 2014. Florence Henderson passed 2 years ago in November of 2016. And do you feel any responsibility now that the adults are unfortunately gone, to keep the torch lit and really say, hey, you know what, we had a great thing. For its time, it was a great show, and it's going to live on forever in syndication. Do you feel like you're a spokesperson now for the bunch?
I think that there's a role shift. I think of the Brady Bunch as a family, that would sort of put me in as a patriarch for the group. I think I've kind of assumed the mantle of the show's brand and what it's about and the experiences and the loving experience that we had for many years. But now I think that torch is sort of passed by time and circumstance. To me.
Let me ask you this. In 2012, Davy Jones died, and I was at work, and I heard it on the radio, and it's always in the same sentence. Not only was he part of the Monkees, but he was on that episode of the Brady Bunch. How is it like having Davy Jones on that show? To me, that's one of my favorite episodes, besides the whole.
Well, it was fun. I was at that time a little bit jealous, the whole thing, Marcia and the crush on Davy. Thought he was stepping on my toes a little bit. But I did have a chance to spend time with David then, but even more later, in 2000, I guess what would it be, probably 2003 or 2, I did a summer tour with David and with Mickey Dolenz, and opened for them at fair dates and at different venues around the country. We did about, a dozen shows together. I come out and open the show and sing and play and with their band, and so we got a chance to tour together, which I really appreciated and got to know him much, much better. And we both had a great love for horses. As you know, he was a jockey and owned horses down in Florida. So very sad about his passing. But grateful that I had a chance to know him. And when we did the show that I was performing in, he always sang the song "Girl." That girl, look what you've done to me, your only friend. He did that for every show since that Brady Bunch episode had aired, because people were always looking and asking for it. And because those episodes have aired so many hundreds of thousands of times each episode, he probably got more play with that than on some of the radio hits that they've had. It was always an important part of the show.
And you know what was interesting about the show? They actually showed, to me, I don't know, but you've recorded, and we're going to get into the music part of the Brady Bunch in just a second. But when he was in the studio and they were doing and then Marsha comes in and is trying to ask him to go to the dance and all this, is that really how it's like in a recording studio?
In what sense? You have an engineer?
Like stop, rotate, and all this other stuff. The switchboard that was there at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that was a Paramount Studios recording, their recording studio, where the orchestra will sit, or how the mics are set up, and so it's usually separated by double pane glass, thick double pane glass for sound purposes, and that big mixing board and microphones in there, and that's exactly how records and vocal tracks were done.
Now let me ask you, the whole thing with singing, the Brady, you're going to get your own cartoon. Now you folks are going on into singing, and the whole episode with Peter's voice, cracking. Why did the show take a track with this, with you folks becoming, singers?
Well, I was one of the driving forces behind that. I knew that I wanted to have music in my career. That's Florence was also made her career in musical theater and then as a cabaret singer, and she brought that talent and element to the show. And I looked around at what was kind of fun and what was pop at that time, and and the concerts I was going to, and I approached the producers and said, look, there are a lot of families out there that aren't even as popular or not even as well known as the Bradys that are doing quite well. At that time, the Jackson Five and the Osmond brothers and the DeFranco family and the Cowsills, and there were all these groups out there, and we had this big national television show that was being seen by 40 million people a week, and so they said, well, yeah, we'll give it a shot. So they ended up putting in about six episodes for various reasons, and it is what it was.
Well, and you know something, because a few years later they would rekindle the Bradys with the Brady Bunch Hour, and surprisingly, Robert Reed was all for this.
Well, this goes back to what I was saying in terms of the roles and the way we genuinely as people felt about each other. Everybody was surprised that Robert, who complained incessantly about the style of the sitcom, now wanted to come back in an even sillier version of a musical variety hour. And I asked him, Rob, how did they get you to do this? And he said, no one else is ever going to play the father of this group besides me.
Yeah, I can't blame him. I can't blame him that much. But something, you had some good guests on the show. You had Tina Turner.
Oh, my God.
Oh, even though if you look at it 40 years later, and you say, well, they had the disco thing, that was, people forget how popular Saturday Night Fever was. And it was filmed in my neighborhood. I grew up in Brooklyn, and so I couldn't wait for my cousin to have her Sweet 16. And it was on, I said, my mother screaming, this is the dance floor John Travolta was on. But it was so big. And you guys did a rendition of The Hustle. You had Milton Berle, Tony Randall, Lee Majors, Vincent Price came on the show, Charo. Half of the people over here, if they're not over 40, don't even know who the hell I'm talking about. But this was pretty good.
Farrah Fawcett and Lee Majors and Rip Taylor and Paul Williams and Lynn Anderson. It just went on and on and on, and it was fantastic. Rich Little, there's a name that not everyone will get, but boy, he my favorite impressionist from growing up. So it was a great experience to be a part of.
And you were doing a Broadway show at the time. You were doing Pippin. And you're performing live, and now you're going to go from doing something live to doing your own variety show.
Cool.
And I know the variety show lasted how long? 6 months, 7 months? I forget.
We did, I think, 9 shows.
Yeah.
8 or 9.
Did you go back to Pippin after that?
Yes.
Oh, you did.
I've done several productions of it. I did the first national touring company, then they invited me into the Broadway show for a short while, and then I did it in regional and different kinds of theater setups. Probably 6 or 8 productions in all.
And let me ask you this. You folks, all 6 of you, with the singing, all know what it's like, what the Beatles had felt like, because you were performing and you had to get police officers to just escort you. Everyone wanted a piece of you. It was like being in the eye of a hurricane at one point.
It was pretty exhilarating, especially for a teenager. We did need securities, coming in and out of the concerts and things like that. And I think there was a greater mystique around television personalities at that time because of the 3-network system, and people that were on these shows, everybody knew. It wasn't there wasn't this niche kind of programming. Everybody knew us, and we were not very, very accessible. So like getting out or going into public, that was a big deal. And now I think television personalities have integrated. And get so much exposure that it's not quite as exclusive, let's say.
No, it's interesting because you have stage and you have television and you have all this. Now, let me ask you, you've been performing, since you were a kid. In fact, you grew up right next to Peter Graves, for God's sakes. And you were on an episode, I believe, of Mission Impossible. But you knew right away, that you wanted to go into acting. What propelled you to do that?
Peter Graves. Before he was, the smooth, silver-haired, sophisticated Mr. Phelps of Mission Impossible, he did a show, kind of a family-type show, Western, called Fury, which starred a very beautiful black stallion that no one could ride except for the adopted son of the character that Peter Graves played. Well, I used to watch that on Saturday mornings, Fury, and it was just great. I just identified with this kid, even though I was 3 or 4 and he was 12. But I thought that just looked like the greatest possible thing ever, and asked Peter. At that age, his daughter was also my age. We went to nursery school together, which is how I was connected. And he said, I just thought about it. I just thought about becoming an actor. And so I went home and thought really hard. That wasn't working, so I told my parents, and they were not very excited about it. And I brought it up again when I was 7 and kind of started, but it required too big of a commitment by my mom. By 11, I marched into the kitchen and I said, Mom, Dad, you're standing in the way of my destiny. Now, I want to get going here.
Let me ask you this. Very interesting. Very interesting. On the set and throughout your career in the 1960s, you had bit parts here and there. How were you schooled? How did you get through, elementary, junior high school, and high school?
Well, all of elementary was it was public school, junior high, public and private schools, and then I really started into studio school full time when the Brady Bunch began, and so excuse me, my high school was all with studio teachers. We had 2 teachers for the 6 of us, so I like to make the joke that my high school was very exclusive. There were only 2 students, Marcia and me, and we used the course study material from our own respective schools, textbooks and curriculum and agenda, and we studied them with our private tutor, and we were able to kind of move ahead. I graduated when I was 16 years old, and I would do I'd do a chapter a day, and and the kids in school were doing a chapter a week, so I could move a little more quickly through it. And then we had school time designated throughout the day when we were called upon to be on the set. So when someone else was doing a scene, the rest of the kids would be in school.
Wow. I always wondered how they did that, because I went to 32 years of schooling, and I'm like, gee, how the heck did they have time to study and all that stuff? Besides memorizing.
32. Excuse me. Did you say you did 32 years of studying?
32 years of school. That means I got my law degree, my master's in history, my master's in taxes, and my master's in accounting.
I went to retire.
Oh, well, yeah, I am retired, I am retired. I'm going to be 48 years old, but unfortunately, like my listeners know, it was diabetes who took me from my career, and gave me another one. Writing books and speaking to folks like you, and having a good time and just getting to dive in and really learn about things that I really wanted to learn about, not that I had to go. Like right now, I'll do part-time cases. I made a living out of battling the IRS and child support payments and doing stuff like that. And like you, I wore many hats over the years. Now, you had children later in life. Me, I was 37. I had twin boys, so they're going to be 11 this year. I lost all my hair. You had kids in your late 50s. How'd that happen?
Well, on purpose, for one thing. I just had, I did not find a partner that I wanted to have a child with until later. and we have a 15-year-old boy, and I also have a very young daughter.
Mm-hmm.
With a different mom.
Yeah, Kennedy. And I remember what I think, Barry. Every time you watch TV, and I don't watch TV anymore. The only thing I tune into is baseball. I shut off the news. Even my kids are like, "Oh my God," because they're just so she's screaming all over this, that. You know when I say, he said, she said. I don't care who's lying, but she dragged it through the mud on live TV.
Well, she tried. You notice that there's not much traction. People have said everything that could be said about me, positively, negatively, has been said. I think people, see, who has credibility and what their agendas are and what they're trying to do and why, and generally as a philosophy, I like to, I pretty much, I always find that when somebody's really speaking negatively about someone or trying to make that person look horrible, that it's really more about the person that's talking than it is about the person they're talking about. And then I have Google alerts too. I know when people are saying things about me, and you'd just be amazed. I've been dead 3 times in the last 4 years. I had one story written about me that I was in a shootout with the Santa Barbara police. 2 officers died, and I ran, but they tracked me. And it was a cannibal, and all kinds of stuff. So it's outrageous, and things happen, and there you go.
And you know something? When I was in law school back in the 90s, I was a junior in law school, and the whole OJ thing happened. And people are always, the whole country was mesmerized by it. And I said, well, what do you think, Ian? And when I said to them, you don't really want to know what I think because it's irrelevant. It's what actually happened. I wasn't there. And so when I see this whole thing, like especially with Gloria's son, Robin Thicke, the ex is doing this, and I spoke to her, I don't believe any of this stuff because I'd use my lawyer tactics and say, okay, it's a he said, she said, and you could choose whoever to believe, but you weren't really there. And that's the thing. You got to give people who are in the limelight, some room to breathe, and not just do this for ratings, to get ratings and slander people. Fatty Arbuckles, no one knows who he was. His career was ruined in the 1920s by false allegations. And if you do your homework, throughout Woody Allen, went through a horrible thing with Mia Farrow in the early 90s. But he continued making movies, and I just don't like when people air out this, and I don't like that all these people jump on, all these announcers and hosts of shows, and they try to get stuff because anyone, like I spoke with Gloria Loring, anyone knows. It's a private matter. You have no right to do it. These are not private. These are not, public issues that these folks talk about. So, I know you had some issues in the past, and I know with Tina, I saw that you were very happy. You in all the interviews I watched on YouTube and NBC or whatever, very happy. How's that going for you?
Just great. I found my life partner. We're doing great, very happy, and we are best friends. We have great respect. We love each other very much, and we're a good team.
And people forget, that the Brady mystique lasted so long. That by the time the Brady girls got married, and I loved that show. I loved Wally. Wally was my favorite character. Okay, I was 11 years old. I want to be like him.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be like him. I think it's just great. But the thing is, 6 years later, the Christmas special comes out, and you break almost every record out there.
Yeah. One of the top 2 highest rated shows for the entire year of all 3 networks in 1989.
Yeah, I remember it, and I think it's that kind of, people, even though a generation had gone by, Brady still lived in the conscience of television world. And I still think today there is still, a lot of that in syndication. Do you think you'll ever have a reunion show, coming up in the 50th stuff, in the 50th anniversary here?
Appearances, perhaps, but I don't think we'll do another show. No, I don't.
That would be a shame. Hey, you're a busy guy. I mean, it's,